Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Something Sinister, where we explore the horror in fact and in fiction. Today's topic is the Appalachian Mountains, and let me tell you, there's some weird stuff going on in the Appalachian Mountains. The video subject matter today was pitched to me and written by my fiance Carly Mihailo. I will go ahead and leave her social media down in the description below. If you want to give her a follow, I'm sure she would appreciate that greatly. So, the Appalachian Mountains are a group of vast ancient mountain ranges extending for almost 2,000 miles. Yeah, they start up in the Canadian province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and they go all the way down to central Alabama in the United States. The oldest summit there is said to be about 1 billion years old, which is kind of crazy. So, sort of given the not only the age but the vastness of them, it's sort of opened the floodgates to a wide array of myths and superstitions that have been passed down through stories over the campfire and stuff like that from native tribes and early settlers, and it's really sort of built this crazy kind of scary mythos that we're going to be talking a little bit about today. So before we jump into it, as always, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to check out this video. Thank you for 15,000 plus subscribers. I really appreciate all of you for continually coming out and supporting the channel and everything. And yeah, I just really appreciate it. I hope that everyone listening has a wonderful holiday season. So first on our list, we have the Brown Mountain Lights. Brown Mountain is actually located in North Carolina, and the Brown Mountain Lights can be characterized as these sort of eerie ghost lights that have been spotted in the night sky for it dates all the way back to 100 years ago. So to many eyewitnesses, the lights appear to be these glowing orbs that hover in the sky above the mountain before suddenly disappearing, or as witnesses describe, soundlessly exploding. The first reported sighting of the Brown Mountain Lights, as we sort of said, was actually in 1913, so a little bit over 100 years ago. In 1913, a group of fishermen actually claimed to see these odd red lights dancing above the horizon by the mountains, and they were the first, but they were not the only ones to have seen or witnessed this sort of strange phenomena. Sightings continued all the way into 1922, and at this point, the U.S. Geological Society had actually agreed to come out and investigate these claims. And they eventually determined that the Brown Mountain Lights were really just the headlights of cars and passing trains in the mountains. So, they had tracks and roads and different things like that up there. However, this theory would eventually be debunked as the area had a major flood. And this flood, the waters took out all of the roads, all of the bridges, tracks, everything. And actually even took out power in the area for several weeks. So given all of this, the Brown Mountain Lights were still spotted in the night sky following this. Now, there are many old folk songs that sort of claim that the lights are actually the ghosts of a slave searching for his lost master. There's actually an episode on the X-Files that says the lights were, of course, caused by UFOs. But I think probably the most popular theory dates all the way back to Native American folklore, which says that following a bloody battle between the Cherokee and the Catawba, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, tribes, it took place on the mountain, and a lot of people died. And the lights, according to this legend, are the ghosts of the grieving women who are still searching the mountainside for the bodies of their husbands who never came home. The Brown Mountain Lights, actually, we had a recent sighting, sort of recent, in July of 2016. The Charlotte Observer reported that there were these Forest Service officers that had a close-up encounter on the mountain with what they described as a beach ball-sized orb that floated and then vanished. And actually, later in August of 2016, the local TV station WLOS reported that scientists from the Appalachian State University believed to have captured images of the Brown Mountain Lights on 2 digital video cameras. And I will, if I can find them, I will leave some of that footage here for you to check out. However, some scientists don't believe this, and that's mostly because they weren't able to, determine what the cause of these strange lights were. Ball lightning, as it's referred to, is a naturally occurring phenomenon in which mountain gases are, sort of expelled and seen visually. That's another theory that is sort of widely accepted by scientists, but nothing paranormal or supernatural. So moving on to perhaps one of the most popular, if not infamous, creatures or phenomena, I guess, if you will, that the Appalachian area has experienced, that being of the Mothman. Now, the Mothman can be described as a winged creature with glowing red eyes. So there were a lot of persistent sightings, which began in November of 1966. And in that year alone, there were at least 26 reports of sightings of the Mothman. Now, these were mostly centered in the Point Pleasant, West Virginia area, and we have a story coming up that sort of lays claim to this as well. Skeptics have offered a lot of various explanations, but most of these explanations boil down to being that of a large bird, whether it be an eagle or a crane or something of the sort. So the most infamous sighting of Mothman was on December 15th, 1967. Locals of the area said that they saw Mothman on top or flying over the Silver Bridge, which was a suspension bridge over the Ohio River, sort of connecting the Point Pleasant, West Virginia area to all the way over to Ohio. So according to this story, shortly after the creature was spotted on the bridge, as we know from history, the bridge collapsed and resulted in the deaths of 46 people. This is sort of given the Mothman a reputation as a bad omen. Like wherever it is spotted, bad things are to follow. So as I mentioned before, we have a personal story from Reddit user Godzillasaurus, who says this Mothman sighting was actually not their own, but their grandmother's. So we're going to go ahead and read that for you. I have always been a skeptic of things to do with the paranormal, so when I heard of the so-called Mothman sightings, I simply thought that it was all just a hoax. Besides, I wasn't scared of pretty much anything because my dad was a US Marine and I always carried a firearm on me for self-defense. Anyways, about 2 weeks after the first sighting, I was driving home late from work through the TNT area. It was about 11:40 p.m. at this point, and it was pitch black for the most part, so I was having trouble seeing through the darkness with my dim headlights. As I got about 1.5 miles into the TNT area, I suddenly saw a large black mass in front of me, and I had to slam on the brakes in order to avoid hitting the damn thing. Once I stopped the car a few feet away from the creature, I finally got a closer look. The creature stood completely still in the middle of the road and looked like an oversized stuffed animal with jet black fur, like a giant fluffy mound, sort of. What the hell is this? I thought to myself as I reached for my bag. I wanted to get my handgun because I didn't know if this thing was a bear or something else. However, as soon as my finger touched the buckle, I heard an audible whoosh sound. I looked up to see the animal had unfolded 2 massive wings, revealing a bird-like body with no head or no neck. I was astonished as it stared at me with blood-red eyes, which glowed like that of a bicycle reflector. I just sat there, frozen in horror, as the animal let out a screech that sounded like it came straight from hell. After coming back to my senses, I decided that I was getting the hell away from this thing, now. I slammed my car into reverse and floored it. As I drove away, I watched as the monster flapped its wings, and with one swift motion, it took off straight into the night and vanished. So moving on, we have the Moon-Eyed People. According to Cherokee legend, long ago before the Cherokee tribe moved into the Smoky Mountains, there were said to be a race of small, bearded white men who lived in the mountains. Now, according to author Julia Montgomery Street, who's sort of popularized this tale of this weird, sort of mysterious race, through her displays in the Cherokee County Historical Museum, has said that these men possessed all of the land from the Little Tennessee River to Kentucky, with a line of fortification from one end of their domain all the way down to the other. So these Moon-Eyed People, or this race of strange men, supposedly lived in rounded log cabins and had these large blue eyes, fair white skin. They were actually sunblind during the day, only emerging from their homes at night in order to hunt, fish, and wage war and build their fortifications. Now, because they could only see in the dark, the Cherokee tribe referred to them as the Moon-Eyed People. Some people believe that these people were descendants of a small group of Welshmen who came to America long before the Spanish settlers had, in the Smoky Mountains around like 1170. And as the legend goes, these Moon-Eyed People eventually abandoned their homes, or perhaps were even driven from it. And they traveled west and were unfortunately never seen again. Now, whether these, small blue-eyed people inhabited the Smoky Mountains before the Europeans, or were have known to discover America, I don't know. We don't know. No conclusive evidence has ever been found, of course, but that is why it is a legend, and because we cannot prove or disprove, the legend lives on. So this next story is actually considered by many to be one of the most frightening paranormal events in the United States, and it is that of the Bell Witch haunting. Now, the Bell Witch haunting occurred in 1817 and lasted until 1821 in the rural town of Adams, Tennessee. This has since gone on to become the subject of numerous books, articles, films, documentaries, you name it. So the haunting began when John Bell, who was a farmer and landowner in the area, witnessed a strange phenomenon on his property. This included the appearance of a strange beast, weird noises coming from other parts of the property, and soon after, John's family members also reported that they were experiencing these unexplained noises and these voices whispering their names, and this extended even to violent, sometimes physical attacks. Now, historians have documented that these experiences became so constant and terrifying that the Bell family was forced to seek help from their neighbors, and even extending a plea of help to the local government officials. Now, of course, at first, when the Bell family told people about what they were experiencing, a lot of people just claimed that they were staging an elaborate hoax, even a village-wide prank. However, as things sort of unfolded, it became clear that there was something a lot larger, something more sinister, if you will, at work. The family was visited by the so-called Bell Witch, who claimed to be the spirit of a woman named Kate Batts. The Bell Witch stated that she had been wronged by John Bell in her past life and vowed to torment him and his family until John died. She kept her promise. John Bell died suddenly and somewhat unexplainably shortly thereafter. The Bell Witch haunting is still considered to be one of the most compelling, as I stated before, cases of paranormal activity in history. There's a lot more that we're not touching on here, so if this is something that interests you, I would highly recommend that you look a little bit more deeper into it. The Bell Witch has never been officially identified. However, many people still believe that her figure is still lurking in the woods around Adams, Tennessee, and she is still seeking revenge on anyone who crosses her path. And believe me, I would hate to be the person who comes across this spirit. Now, this next creature, or monster, I should say, is one of my favorites. As I was growing up, I was aware of this tale. I didn't grow up directly in the area, but sort of just a state over, and it was a popular story. So it's actually the story of the Flatwoods Monster. So in the late days of summer of 1952, there were two brothers named Edward and Fred May. They lived in, of course, Flatwoods, West Virginia, and they were outside playing before they rushed home to tell their mother, named Kathleen, that they had seen something unexplainable. They said that while they were playing football at a nearby playground, they had witnessed a bright UFO streak across the sky and land on the property of a local farmer. Sort of intrigued and skeptical about this, Kathleen, her sons, and some other local boys who had witnessed this strange craft headed out to the farm to see what was going on. It was nearing dusk when they saw an unidentified object in the woods. They explained it as sort of this odd-shaped thing that appeared to be glowing red with smoke and steam coming off of it. And this was according to Andrew Smith, executive director of the Braxton County CVB and curator of none other than the Flatwoods Monster Museum. 17-year-old Eugene Lemon, a National Guardsman who had also tagged along on this adventure to see this crash, had said that there was a pulsing light, and when he pointed his flashlight towards it, it revealed a pair of bright eyes in a tree, and what they described as a 10-foot monster with a blood-red face and green body that seemed to glow was standing before them. The monster was said to have hissed and then floated towards the group, causing Lemon to scream and drop his flashlight. Later on, according to newspaper reports, several of the party fainted and vomited for several hours after returning home. Later on, Kathleen was quoted by saying that the monster looked worse than Frankenstein, so you know it was legit. Now, a lot of people believe that the group had this volatile, sickly reaction because not only, of course, were they in shock, but it was from the gas or the steam that this creature was emitting. A lot of people believe that they were poisoned in some sense. The group had turned in and ran down the hill and immediately went to the local sheriff's office to report the incident. Nearly an hour later, there were several officers who were storming the property with loaded shotguns, and Lemon had sort of led them back to the scene where everything had happened. All they found was that horrible smell that they had reported before, as well as these slight heat waves in the air. The Flatwoods Monster is still a mystery, but they say it was so interesting mostly because this took place back in the 1950s when, sightings of UFOs and extraterrestrials were few and far between and extremely taboo. Like if you told your mother, father, friends, whoever, that you had encountered a UFO back then, they would have checked you into the psychiatric facility. But this was a big deal. It was one of the first UFO phenomenons to make national headlines. And now if you go to Flatwoods today, there's a main road that leads into the town that says, "Welcome to Flatwoods, home of the Green Monster." So they are very much so welcoming this story and using it as a tourist attraction. A lot of skeptics say that the Flatwoods Monster was just misidentified as a barn owl, which is kind of strange to me. But whether it's fake or not, it's still a fun story nonetheless. Now, I know this legend is definitely the most popular on the list, and that is the legend of Bigfoot. So, the Appalachian Mountains are actually believed to be the haven for Bigfoot. And as we know, Bigfoot is an elusive creature. It's been spotted all around throughout Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, mostly, those areas. But eyewitness accounts have described the creature as having different colored fur. Though one of the most striking species of Bigfoot is actually a nocturnal creature with black fur that is said to have glowing eyes. Prior to the 20th century, Bigfoot was actually mostly referred to as Sasquatch, which I think is a much funner term. And the Sasquatch was a hairy creature back then known for bellowing, stealing livestock, shaking trees, and even kidnapping like hikers and other people in the mountains or in the woods. Many indigenous tribes had their own version of Bigfoot. They didn't always obviously use that term, but the myth of the Sasquatch was the first to be recorded by European settlers. And since the mid 1800s, thousands of Bigfoot sightings have been reported all across the United States. Including dozens of reported sightings in the North Georgia mountains as well. So this personal story is actually one of the most recent that I've seen. It comes from August 14th, 2023. It comes from a couple who were hiking the Appalachian Trail, and they were actually around the Dauphin County, Pennsylvania area. And here's what they had to say. My girlfriend and I woke up yesterday, that's Monday, August 14th, 2023, around 9 a.m. at Peters Mountain Shelter on the Appalachian Trail. We had begun to continue our backpacking trek north. We had an encounter with Bigfoot, for sure. It was easily 10 feet tall, with no smell that I recalled. I yelled, "Hey," in order to scare it away. We were scared and we didn't know what else to do. The creature had turned around and looked at us and made a soft grunting noise before running away, making huge running strides with very little noise. We quickly hiked north on the trail. I grabbed my phone and dropped a pin on the location. Now, this is a very basic encounter story, but what I think is interesting is I think hoaxes will become more difficult to pull off given the nature of technology. And I'll actually leave an image to the ping that they left before. So if you want to travel out and maybe catch a glimpse of the Bigfoot, you can do so. Moving on, we have the Wampus Cat. Now, the story goes that the Wampus Cat was actually once a beautiful Cherokee woman. Her husband would often leave the village with the other men to go out hunting and then obviously later bring back food. But before each trip, the men would gather in the woods and ask forgiveness for the lives of the animals that they were about to take, and to not only do that, but also seek supernatural help in their task. Women, of course, given the hierarchy of the Cherokee, were forbidden from ever seeing any of these sacred rites or rituals. But this woman's curiosity in particular had consumed her. She wanted to know what exactly the nature of the magic was that these men were doing. She begged and begged her husband to reveal this to her, but he always refused. So one night, as the men set out to go into the forest, the woman took matters into her own hands. She had wrapped herself in cougar skin and quietly crept through the woods. She eventually came upon a clearing in the forest where the men had gathered. She hid behind a rock and sort of, watched from a distance and was absolutely enthralled by what she was seeing. She eventually crept closer and closer to the men in the circle, wanting to take in every detail that she could, but eventually she got too close. The sorcerer leading the rituals had spotted her and immediately saw through her disguise. He had ordered the men of the tribe to grab her, and then they dragged her into the circle. Now, as punishment for breaking the rules, the sorcerer cast a spell onto the woman. The cougar skin that she had wrapped herself in became her own skin. She became this sort of strange mix of cougar and human, and was cursed to live like this forever, alone in the woods, never able to enjoy human company ever again. And so, as legend goes, the Wampus Cat roams the Appalachian Mountains at night, traveling up and down the hills, in and out of the valleys, forever wandering alone in the mountains. Now, there are some people who say that when she steals animals or ruins things for local farmers, that she's actually acting out in anger and resentment for being cut off from the rest of mankind. There are also some people who think that she will roam the mountains forever, lurking around places where people live, but will never be able to rejoin them. And that in and of itself is a very heartbreaking premise. And so whenever these strange cries are heard at night, whenever something gets disturbed in these little settlements in the hills, whenever animals go missing from a farmland, the mountain people believe that this is the Wampus Cat. And now here is a personal childhood encounter posted to r/paranormal from Reddit user Kathy H1. I was between 7 and 8, living in my old small town of Matthias, Texas, in case anyone was curious, and this was roughly around 1979. I always played outside after school, in both the front and backyards. On this day, I was in the front yard messing with my bike. I was obsessed with putting WD-40 on the chain, constantly. Anyways, I was about to leave my yard and get on the street when I saw this cat-like thing. It almost had a head like a lion, but proportioned with a normal cat size. It was standing in the middle of the road. I stopped and stared at it. It turns its head, and I swear that it smiled at me. Its head was very mane-like. It then slowly walked off down the road and into the cornfield. Needless to say, I ran in and told my mom, who didn't believe me and said that I had a wild imagination. But I know that I saw it. I'm now 50 years old, and the memory is as confusing as it is clear as the day that it happened. The only odd part of the story is, less than a month later, my mom was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, as I found her wandering the same street, unaware of who I was. Sometimes I wonder if the whole event was a bad omen, or a sign of tragedy to come. Now that brings us to our final legend of the day, and that being of the Grafton Monster. Now, the Grafton Monster is described as being 7 to 9 feet tall and at least 4 feet wide, and having this weird white seal-like skin. The monster is also said to possess no discernible head, and it is said to emit a whistling sound. So, on June 16th of 1964, Robert Cockrell got off work from his job at a local newspaper publication known today as the Mountain Statesman. It was around 11 p.m., and he was journeying home. So he was driving down Yates Avenue along the western banks of the Tigard River. He had made the turn, and there was a curve in the road where he encountered the Grafton Monster. He described it as being this huge white obstruction with slick white skin and no head at all. He then rushed home, and he was terrified, and he called his friends Jerry Morse and Jim Mauser to accompany him in further investigation of the scene. However, when the three men returned to the sighting location, there was no sign of the monster. However, there was the grass where the creature was said to have been standing was trampled over, and the whole time that they were in the area, they heard that same low whistling sound. Now, the next day at work, Cockrell was really apprehensive to talk about this publicly, but as he was sort of working, he overheard stories that his coworkers were telling about the monster, and upon hearing of other sightings, he decided to speak up himself. More than 20 calls came in from people all over the area to the newspaper saying that they had allegedly seen this monster as well. Robert Cockrell wrote an article that would popularize the Grafton Monster, which was published to the newspaper in June 18th of 1964. Now, it became sort of this popular thing in the area for groups of teenagers and young people to go out into the woods and do what they were stating as monster hunting, basically looking for the Grafton Monster. A lot of stories of the Grafton Monster would come from that, of these kids reportedly being out in the woods and seeing the monster. However, as with everything else on this list, these sightings followed investigation with no conclusive or physical evidence ever to be found. But nonetheless, these stories continue and are very fun to talk about and speculate on, and I can't thank you guys enough for joining me in this talk. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next video.